Starting out doing research can be a bit overwhelming, but it's also really important that in that beginning time when you're just starting out, you're establishing those good habits that are going to help you be successful throughout your career in science and especially with regards to research. And so here's just a quick start guide for starting off research with good habits. I have an accompanying blog version and it has the same information as this downloadable version. And I just wanted to direct you to a couple other places on my blog while I'm here. This resources tab, I have some links to various posts of mine and various other things that I think might be helpful that I find very helpful to go back to and some key database information, posts on various techniques that I use over and over. I'm a biochemist, and so a lot of this is going to be related to biochemistry and molecular biology, but a lot of these things are also going to be useful for other fields of research. And so lots and lots of things here, as well as some of the things that I found helpful from others as well in this kind of like biochemist toolbox. And a lot of the things that I'm going to be showing you can also be found on my practical advice on various things page. And so there's more here than I'm going to talk about today, but the things that I'm talking about today, a lot of them can also be found on this practical post page. And I don't monetize any of this. I do it just because I want to help pay it forward and help people be successful. And especially, I'm really interested in helping people become successful in their early stages by setting out these good habits. And so this is some of the things that I found very helpful, at least. Your mileage may vary. So first off, a reference manager. So this is something like Mendeley or Zotero. I use Zotero. I love Zotero. There is a free version of Zotero that has a limited amount of storage. It's still a lot of storage, but then if you want to pay more, you can get additional storage. It has both web and versions as well as the desktop version. It'll keep track of all your papers. You can organize it in various ways, and it'll generate citations for you. You want to make sure that you install the associated browser extensions. And so Zotero's extension, when you're on an article, it'll either show up as a piece of paper or it'll show up as a Z, depending on the amount of access to the paper. If you click on that, you can have it download to your library. And so I'm having it download the PDF as well as a snapshot. So information about it, the citation information I'll need, things like this. If I go ahead and click enter, so now if I come over to Zotero, I can see that it's here. This piece of paper icon shows me that I have a PDF there. And in fact, you can see that I do. And if I click on it, I can go and I can read the PDF. And you can also see that it has pulled in all of the associated information that I would need to cite it. But I don't need to manually cite it. Instead, I just come over here, I right click, I do create bibliography from item. I choose my citation style and voila, it'll do that. And I can select multiple articles and do the same thing. If I wanted to create a bibliography with multiple items, it also has Word and Google Doc integrations so that you can generate in-text citations while you're writing, and it'll update those citations to make sure that the numbers correspond with the right things and all that great stuff. So I really like Zotero. I organize it and then I can find things easily. You can search things by title, creator, year, keywords, all this great stuff. And it's really, really helpful. And it's really, really easy to use. And so I suggest that whenever you're on the page of an article, you go ahead and add it to your library. If it's something you even have the faintest thinking that you might be useful for you. So maybe it's probably not useful. You'll probably never look at it again, but you might, and it's going to be a lot easier to find when it's already in your Zotero library. And so go ahead and do that, and you will thank yourself, your previous self. When you're trying to think about, I feel like I came across something like that a while back. I have no idea. And if it's in your Zotero, you can find it. And so I have a guide to using Zotero, and that sort of thing are awesome. Okay, so it's one thing to have those articles in your library, but how do you actually go about finding the articles? How do you stay up to date on fields that are changing all the time? And so there's a few different things that you can do, and one is to set up alerts. And so you can set up alerts in various things. And so PubCrawler, PubMed, Google Scholar, bioRxiv alerts, Google alerts, all these will allow you to set up alerts for different things like authors. So if an author publishes a paper, you'll get an alert. You can have them set up based on topic, where you can put in your research subject, and then if that subject has some article written about it, then you're going to get an alert and you can go and you can look at the article. It's especially important to set up alerts that include preprints. So a lot of biochemistry research, a lot of medicine research, a lot of biology research is published on bioRxiv. bioRxiv is a preprint server, so the articles haven't been peer reviewed yet, but this is the most hot off the press stuff typically. And so you want to make sure that you have alerts set up to get those preprint alerts. A clipboard ma a clipboard manager. This is so helpful. It's one of the most useful things I've ever found. So this is CopyClip, and it just has this little clip paperclip icon up here, and it'll keep hold of the things that I have copied in the recent past. And so I can copy and paste things from one place to another. And I can copy a bunch of stuff and then paste it without having to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So super duper helpful. Install the clipboard manager. Other things to install. I really like this Unpaywall browser extension. So this is just a free extension that you install, and then it will show you if there are free versions of an article available when you come across an article. So a lot of times articles are paywalled, and so you have to pay in order to view them. And other articles are open access. And so this indicates that this article is already open access. And so we've got this open lock symbol, but sometimes things aren't. But sometimes when things aren't open access, there are still legal versions of the articles that are available online. And then what Unpaywall does is it'll indicate whether there is. And so if this is grayed out, if you have a grayed closed lock, that means that there's not a free version available online that Unpaywall has access to at least. But this green block, you can see it'll take me here to the same page because this article is open access. But if the article weren't open access and you saw that green, it would take you to the free legal version. Another thing to install is this PubPeer browser extension. So you can see up here, this green bar, it's saying that the ribosome profiling strategy, blah, 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 has comments on PubPeer. So this is not my article. I mean, this article is my article, but this article that it's highlighting is not mine, but it's one that I cited. And so it's saying there's something that is written about in PubPeer for that article. And if I come to that PubPeer, if I clicked on that link, well, now it'd say that people have commented that there might be some double publication, figure, and text recycling. And so it sounds like these people, it looks like this was a protocols paper and they were citing some of the stuff from their previous paper or something, but maybe they didn't, these people think that it wasn't done appropriately or something. Basically, with PubPeer, people are often pointing out things like figure duplication, pointing out things like sketchy results. There are also non-bad comments on PubPeer, but a lot of times it's people kind of questioning the validity of findings, questioning the ethics of various things. And so PubPeer extension is helpful to have. It'll also so it'll be a kind of this teal bar if it's just some comment. But if it is actually something has been retracted, then you're going to see like this big red bar and it'll say something that thing had been retracted. So that PubPeer extension is just another one of those free extensions. More free stuff. Okay, ORCID or ORCID. This is basically this number that is attached to you, and then you have this ORCID, and you see this little like kind of green symbol, this ID. This is a unique ID for you. So a lot of times people have the same name, scientists have the same name, authors have the same name. And a lot of other times people change their name. Maybe they get married, they change their last name. And so you want to know, is this Jane Doe the same as that Jane Doe? And what else have they written and that sort of thing. And so the ORC ID is a way that you have this kind of number associated with a person. It's this unique 16-digit identification code, and scientists can use that in addition to their name to associate with their work, and then you can tell who's who. And so it's good to get one of these early on, even if you're not planning on publishing soon, because it'll allow you then you can use that ORC ID as the login information for various things like the NCBI. So my NCBI is a tool from the National Library of Medicine. So I don't know the current stat, like how stable it is right now, given government funding stuff. But the past, at least, it has been very helpful for keeping track of your works, for keeping track of your PubMed searches. And so PubMed is a database of papers or information about papers, at least. And so often you can use PubMed for searches, and you can save your searches if you have a MyNCBI account. And you can also use a MyNCBI account to do things like make bio sketches if you're applying for grants. And so more on that here. Not going to go into that. RSS reader. So that's another way you can stay up to date on things. And so RSS feeds, you can sign up for these. And this, based on topics you're interested in, it'll pool the papers on those topics from various journals. And so some examples are like NewsBlur is what I was using when I wrote this. I haven't actually been using one lately because I've been more dealing with teaching and things, and my alerts are keeping me up to date on the things that I need. Databases. So databases to get familiar with. I have a much longer guide to this. And so I will point you to that if you want to know even more about where to go for what. But bottom line, the places I go the most often, UniProt. This is your first stop for protein information. So much you can do with UniProt, and it'll take you to additional sources of information. PDB, this is where you have the structures of proteins, things like this, and you can explore them in 3D. You could download them, you can find information, all that great stuff. GenBank, there we're talking about nucleic acid sequences. Then PubMed, as I was mentioning, for papers. And again, you can find more on all of these different things on my blog. And I have a longer guide that you can download as well. Now let's get into some good habits to start in the lab. So it's really important that you establish and you stick to a consistent file naming and organization system. I cannot stress this enough. Start this early, start a consistent system, have folders and subfolders, all that stuff laid out and consistently saved to the right locations. It's really helpful to use something like Box or something like OneDrive. Often your institution that you're working at is going to have a preferred place where they want you to be backing up your data. And it's really important then that you are saving it to that location, and also that then you have the desktop versions of those things installed so that you can have them show up in your Finder. And so I also, in my Finder window, I tab on the priority tabs or whatever on the side, I put the folders that I access the most frequently. Do not just save things to your downloads. Make sure that you're saving them to the correct location. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people just save things to their downloads. And I know sometimes I'm guilty of it as well, but that's not the place you want to be just saving everything to. You want to include the dates in your file names, or I think that's very, very helpful because then you could easily cross-reference it to your notes. And as long as you keep really detailed notes, then having those dates is going to be incredibly helpful. What you don't want to have in your file names are spaces. And so spaces are going to confuse computers and things. So it's much better to use underscores instead of spaces. That'll make things much easier to search for and various things like that. Okay, so spreadsheet inventories. These are also going to be your friends. And so spreadsheets in general are going to be your friend, but I like to keep inventories of my things. And so here's some information about plasmid inventories, and I have an example template. And so for my different protein constructs, I have the things like the name of it. I give things a code to keep track of things more easily without having to write out these full names, especially when I'm dealing with a ton of different mutants and different tags and all this stuff. I have the description, I have the type of tag, the vector, antibiotic resistance, promoter, the size of the various things, sizes with and without tags, the PI, all that various information. So yeah, so there's just this example template, and then you can use that if you think that would be helpful for you. So I use those plasmids to express proteins, and then I have proteins that I purify, and I need to keep track of the proteins that I purified, as well as the pellets that I have to purify. And so I have another template you can look at that I use in order to keep track of the cultures that I've grown. And now I have pellets of these bacterial cells filled with my protein that I need to purify. And so I have information about those in my protein prep inventory, as well as then once I've purified it, I include information about the protein and the purified protein and its concentration and all that good stuff and how I've stored it and when I made it. It's really important to have the dates of when you made things, and then when you're doing an experiment with the protein, to reference back to when you made the protein, when you purified the protein, in case there was something bad with the batch or something. This is going to help you now. Having things in spreadsheets, one of the great things about having things in spreadsheets is that you can have them do calculations for you. And so you can set up your spreadsheet so that it'll do things like calculate the molarity of your protein based on the mgs per mil or vice versa and things like this. You want to keep good notes in addition to your spreadsheets. And so I like to keep both physical notes as well as digital notes. And so I use OneNote to keep track of my notes. And I also then have physical notebook, lab notebook, and I take pictures of my lab notebook, my physical one, and I paste them in my digital one, as well as typing things in my digital one. And that's going to help me cross-reference. It'll allow me to not have to be typing on my computer when I'm doing slimy stuff. I can just write things down in my notebook, but then make sure that I have that notebook information in my electronic version for easy reference, and so I can be searching through things. I plan out my experiments in detail before I do them, and then I print out the kind of my action plan, and I use a magnetic clip to clip those above where I'm working so I can reference them as I go and take notes on them, and then I'll take pictures of those at the end and put them back in my electronic version of my notebook. But it's really helpful to plan out your experiments in great detail before you actually do them so that you can make sure that you're setting them up correctly and you don't have to redo things and you can really think things out strategically. And by doing things in spreadsheets, you're able then to have it do the calculations for you. And so I have much more information on how to kind of set up experimental spreadsheets, or at least how I do it. And I have an example template that you can download. Even if you're not setting up your whole experiment, doing like this formal experiment template, you can use spreadsheets to do calculations for you, especially like master mix calculations. Spreadsheets are going to be your great friend. Master mixes are going to be great friends. You have shared components of things and unique components, and then you premix the shared components, add those to the unique components, save yourself a bunch of pipetting pain, and you can save yourself a bunch of calculation pain by doing things in a spreadsheet. So much more on that here. That was that example one. Here's another spreadsheet example for PCR and SLIC. So site in ligation independent cloning, which is it's the cloning technique that I use, and it's a PCR based technique, pretty easy. And so I have more on that here, and I have more on various things here, as well as the calculations. Another thing you want to keep track of with the spreadsheet, or at least I do, is my enzyme assay results. And so I do some enzyme assays where I'm measuring enzyme activity, and I then have various conditions and I keep a log so I know when I did what, and then the kind of results of it. Oh, I forgot to add here too, but I also have a spreadsheet where I keep track of my runs on the ACTA, so the protein purification, and the various conditions and injection volumes and all that good stuff. Of course, the date too. It sounds kind of silly maybe, but you want to practice pipetting. You can pipette, then weigh drops to see how accurate you are based on the density of water and things and how precise you are, how close together your various drops are. And so, depending on what you're pipetting, you might need to use different techniques. You might need to be very careful when you're doing small volumes, things like this. And I have a lot of posts and videos on pipetting. So maybe you're trying to pipette viscous solutions, you're trying to pipette small volumes, all these various things, multi-channels, lots of things in this pipette posts. When you're given a protocol, make sure you know what's going on at each step. And makes things more fun, but it also makes things easier to troubleshoot and know where you can cut corners, where you can't cut corners, all that great stuff. If you want to know more about various techniques, I have a whole page of lab technique posts. And so these go into some of the theory behind things as well as some of the practical aspects of actually going and doing them. And so I've got videos on YouTube as well for some of these techniques. In addition to knowing what's going on inside of an experiment and the formal ways to do things, there's also a lot of benefit to just watching people do things and learning from others practical lab tips. And so take advantage of the other people in your lab, look around, see how they do things, try things out different ways. You'll probably see that some people in the lab will do things one way, other people in the lab will do things another way. And you can ask them why they're doing it that way, and sometimes it's just because that's how they learned, or things like this. And so find what works for you and try things out. What works for me, I've got some practical lab tips and trips. So making 80% glycerol, how to mix your tubes, things to save you some money, various quick tips on various things. And so these are just some of the things that I found helpful. Some of these things I learned from others, some I learned the hard way. And so there you go. There's lots of practical posts there. And then there's a YouTube playlist as well. Okay, so we're getting there. What else do we want to learn? So basic computer programming, even with AI being able to code improvingly well and kind of scarily well sometimes, I still recommend learning some simple command line in Python. When AI generates code, so like Google Colab, you can have it use AI to generate code for you. You can also have various other things do that, like GitHub. There's various ways that you can have things coded for you, but they're not always correct. They might have some errors and you might want to optimize them. And knowing how to code yourself is going to be really helpful for that. And command line is going to be really helpful for downloading some of the software that you're going to need to download. And so you want to get comfortable with command line, just the basics so you can download things and all that good stuff. You might want to get like a GitHub account, Git. So I have various posts on various things like that. I'm not going to go into here, but I do recommend some basic computer programming. I also recommend, highly recommend a vector graphics program. So something like Adobe Illustrator, which is expensive unless you have it through your institution, or something like Inkscape, which is free, but not as powerful. I use Adobe Illustrator and I have a guide to Adobe Illustrator, some various tutorial videos, some things that I found helpful and I go back to over and over. Adobe Illustrator can do a lot more than you need it to do for most things. And this is just kind of the quick and dirty. What do you need to know in order to do things like make figures of your experiments that you annotate? Speaking of which, I recommend that before you kind of move away from a experiment, you make at least one figure of your results because you never know when you're going to need to go back and be asked for some results or something in a meeting. You want to have at least one formatted figure. And I have more on how to kind of make experimental figures and how I like to orient things so that I can easily crop things off in various directions to show only like the graph portion if I don't want the experimental details shown on a slide maybe, but I have those experimental details so that I can have them if I need them. In addition to actually physically doing things in the lab, you want to read about what others did in the lab and get ideas for what you can do within the lab. And so you're going to need to do some paper reading, and paper reading is hard. And so I have some advice on it, as well as I have this template where you can keep track of your notes on various papers, articles, and figures from those articles, review papers, and the key thing for this is that it kind of includes the relevance to you and how you might use it. So various things like that. Sometimes in those papers and a lot of times in the lab, you're going to hear a bunch of slang, a bunch of jargon, or see it used. Things like spin down for centrifuging or crashing out for precipitating, ON for overnight, various abbreviations. And so I have a guide to some biochemistry slang. It's still in a draft format, but hopefully it can help someone. And there's a place where you can add things too if you wanted to add suggestions. When in doubt, Google. And sometimes I tell my students to Google things and I'm like, seriously, this is what I would do. Or I Google things together with them to show them that that really is how I would do things and show them how they can Google and find answers for a lot of different things. Sometimes though, when you're Googling, you need to be really strategic. And so using things like plus signs, if you want both words included, using terms that are going to make Google know that you want science versions of the science definitions of things and science contexts of things instead of just more general usage, and filtering your results, various things like this. Of course, you want to be very critical about what you're reading, but the first step is to actually find things. And so Googling strategically is really, really going to be helpful. Familiarize yourself with resources. And so again, I have those couple pages on my blog with some resources that I found helpful and some posts of mine that I think might be helpful for others. There's a lot out there, and sometimes it can be really overwhelming in terms of how much resources there are. But hopefully having them kind of these sorts of guides will be helpful to help you know where to go. Speaking of knowing where to go, not all resources are going to be digital. Most of the resources are going to be the people around you. It's really important to build a support system. And this starts with choosing your lab really carefully to make sure that you're finding one where you have support throughout your ups and downs. So don't just focus on, oh, these people are doing cool research. Focus on, these are really cool people. These are really helpful people that are going to be a supportive place for me to learn. An environment where I can feel comfortable failing, because failure is a large part of science and a large part of starting out. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. Experiments won't work, all these various things. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and you want to identify friends and mentors around you in your lab as well as beyond who can provide the advice that you need in various topics, as well as just provide that moral support when you need it. You all probably have different mentors for different things. So some people might give you hands-on guidance at the bench, maybe like a postdoc in the lab, or another grad student who's later on maybe, or maybe even earlier than you, because you're probably going to be helping people too. Everybody in the lab is going to have different skills that then they're going to help people on. Some people are really great if for just experimental brainstorming sessions. Can I toss an idea off of you? As well as for things like career guidance. It can be really tempting to just put on headphones and drown out the world around you when you're in the lab, but it's also really helpful to have your ears open, have your eyes open, and see what the people around you are doing, especially in those early days, to really pick up the helpful habits from the people around you and learn what they're doing, why they're doing it that way, that sort of thing. And then you can go on and teach others. So there's a common phrase in the lab, see one, do one, teach one. So you see someone do one, then you do one yourself, and then you teach someone to do one. Because the real test of whether you've mastered a technique is to teach others to do it correctly. So speaking of teaching others, I hoped I helped teach you some good habits that you can go and start using. And I hope that they help you be successful in wherever your science time takes you.